Welcome back to That's Church. I'm Maisie, and my mom and aunt are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, just like me. They go around Utah discovering and interviewing various churches. I'm so excited and intrigued to learn with them about our neighbors and their religions.
Mary Wagner was born and raised in Arizona, spending most of her formative years in Window Rock, the capital of the Navajo Nation. After leaving Window Rock, she lived in Missouri, where her mother is from, experiencing a very different way of life alongside her 7 brothers and 2 sisters. A few years later, they moved back to Arizona. Mary eventually married, had 4 children, finished college, then completed an MBA after her divorce. She spent 2 years in Denver and is now enjoying life in Southern California. Mary has worked in tribal law, contributing her expertise to support Native American communities. She enjoys spending time with her 4 grown children, learning, traveling, and communing with the sand and waves. Mary strives to live everything better than she found it, whether it's her former places of employment, former homes, or the world we live in. Enjoy the episode. I loved in your bio that you said that you enjoyed communing with the sand and the waves in Southern California. So tell us about that. What does that offer you? Does it offer you something spiritually or otherwise?
Yeah, before I moved out here, I would come out to the beach every summer for the last 7 years before I moved here. I lived in Arizona, and so it was a really quick and easy drive over to San Diego or Los Angeles, and not Los Angeles, actually, the city, but in the area. There's so many beaches here. It was just super easy. It was a quick and easy trip, so I would do that. I moved to Denver, and then I would, I went to beaches in Massachusetts or Charleston, where my oldest daughter lives, and Greece. I went to Greece to the beach there. I would just go anywhere for a beach, really, truly. It's just wherever I can find one, that's where I'm going to go. For me, I have never felt more connected to divinity than when I'm alone on the beach, early morning hours, and just, feeling the power around you, just feeling the sand, hearing the waves, being able to smell the salt water, just seeing the life teeming in the water that's close to you, or dolphins, sometimes if you're lucky, dolphins out on the water. Just really, truly knowing that we are not as powerful as we like to think we are. But for me, just having that peace, just sitting on the sand, just feeling it, just hearing it, and having it absorb into me, the warmth of the sun, and that to me is sacred. That's just a sacred moment for me. So I really feel that could be different for everybody, but I really feel just having something that's a touchstone that can help you to feel that connectivity to your own divinity and to the divinity of everything around you. And so I say the word divinity sometimes, and that doesn't necessarily have to mean God or goddess or whatever. I mean, I think that when I was in primary, I don't know if you guys ever, but there was this little song that was Father, Son, Mother, Earth, we thank thee for giving us life.
I don't think I've ever heard that one.
I'm a little older. No, just kidding. But truly, that is one of those things where it's we've disconnected ourselves from nature so much because we're looking for God in buildings. We're looking for God through the words of some guy or some woman. I don't mean to be flip about that. I really don't. But we're not looking for God, or divinity, whatever that looks like for you. We're not looking for that anymore in places that are by nature divine. That could be the mountains, that could be the beach, that could be the desert. For some people, that was not for me. The desert was not divine for me at all, by any stretch of the imagination. But for some people, it is. So, but finding peace with that divinity in a way that works for you is truly, in my opinion, the most important thing you can do for yourself. Because if we can't connect to that divinity, we're not connecting with ourselves. And truly, I don't believe that finding that experience happens through constraining beliefs, through dogma that isn't backed by data. Those things cannot, in my opinion, work together, because if you are so focused on following rules and doing what's right, there's the air quotes again. If you're so focused on following rules and doing what's right, then you cannot focus on your own self. And I think we've also had a wave, I would say, of a mindset that we can't be selfish, that it's not, that we're not supposed to be selfish. And I think there's a big difference in being actually selfish and actually taking care of yourself. And conflating those two things is never going to work.
Yes.
Because if you're trying so hard not to be selfish that you're not taking care of yourself, then you're doing more harm than good. Or if you're taking care of yourself more than you're trying not to be selfish, there's a balance there, and everybody has to find that for themselves. But nobody should ever, ever feel like taking care of themselves in all ways, physically, spiritually, however else. Nobody should ever feel that taking care of themselves is wrong. They just shouldn't.
No, completely agree.
I totally agree. And I think women have a hard time with that sometimes, because we are programmed to be selfless, and we're programmed to take care of others.
Be nurturing.
I'm a huge proponent of women that empower themselves and that do things that can fuel yourselves and, re-energize and do things for ourselves to take care of ourselves. So I love that. I love that you mentioned that.
We were just talking about this today, and Emmy said that, as women, especially women within a religion that is predominantly led by men, or honestly a society that's still, not fully equal, we can sometimes think that, oh, well, he's this label or he's that, so I should take his counsel or his wisdom.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not for us. And it's not to say it's not for someone else. And Emmy, I'm not trying to steal this, because Emmy actually said this to me today. So I'm going to give her all the credit on that, because it is such a great reminder that we can still respect someone, but not agree with them. And we can also decline their advice if it doesn't work for us.
Yeah. That is absolutely true. And, I think that for women, we've historically, this is not limited to religion, but even just society, we have been taught that taking care of ourselves is bad because it benefits other people for us to believe that. If we're taking care of ourselves, then we're not taking care of whomever. I don't want to really just pin everything on, cisgender, straight, white men, Christian, white men, but we do live in a patriarchal society. So, we'll just say that it does tend to lean that way, but we have been taught by society to be this way because it benefits those who control society. So,
and in actuality, we really can't take care of people as well if we're not taking care of ourselves, so it's so backwards. I see the mentality of it and like why it started that way, but it really is so wrong.
It's so wrong.
It's so backwards.
Yeah. And I can't remember the name of the book. If I can remember it, I'll email it to you. But I read this book. It was actually a men's mental health book. But it talked about how men and women were very egalitarian for so long until the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution marks the time when men started to go work for someone else and women tended to stay home to raise the kids, take care of the house, do some sort of work that they could do in the house. And that's when we started to go like this. Our directions started to really become very distant from where they were before, which was very much we're working together to grow the crops. We're working together. And I'm not saying that it was like perfectly like that for every single family ever in existence before the Industrial Revolution. But generally speaking, that was more of the dynamic, and the Industrial Revolution absolutely broke that up. Men went off and worked, women stayed. Women would also go off and work until they had kids and ended up staying home, or until they took their 5-year-old kid to work in the factory with them. But until that point, it was very much the dynamic was men and women working together to build a home, raise the kids, etc.
Wow.
I'm going to figure out what the name of that book is.
If you can, we'll link it in the show notes. But would you say it was like that? What would you say the experience was on the reservation as far as the household setup? Was there a leader of the home, or did it seem pretty equal? You said it was matriarchal, but was it pretty equal between the parents?
Well, I would say definitely it was very much the women had more power in the judge. But I just to really be clear, I was very young. I don't remember very specifically, although it seemed as though, and honestly, this is part of the dynamic behind ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, that I'm sure you've seen in the news at once or twice in your life. Especially a few years ago, it was very much, a case that went to the Supreme Court about ICWA. The whole premise behind ICWA is that the women, placing a child with another family member is absolutely the first thing that happens. That's absolutely the way it works and has worked for millennia. If there's a child that needs to be taken care of, the women in the family or tribe take care of that child. There was
heard that.
And
That's
so that
cool.
was the whole premise behind ICWA, was that in Native American kids, this is their culture. This is the way they've done it for, again, centuries. There's a child that's parent isn't able to take care of them. Everybody else just pitches in and takes care of that child, period. So for a child to be taken away and put with a white family where they don't know their history, they don't know their culture. Again, this is just one more example of erasure of Native American culture and history. And this is why it's such a hot button topic for tribes, because there's no such thing as the person taking care of them isn't around anymore. We should give them up for adoption, because there's 50 other people around to take care of that child. That child isn't alone, So
that's so interesting. And I have to share that our mom and Emmy both worked for an adoption agency. And I remember being a teenager, and I'm ashamed to say that when my mom told me that, it's really hard to adopt American Indian babies because the tribe owns the baby, I had the opposite feeling. I thought, oh, that's so sad. The parents want to give the baby up to a good family and the tribe won't let them. And I'm ashamed to say that was my thinking, which just goes to show that what we don't know, we don't know. Because, I know better that, where is it? And maybe being with a different family is the right thing for that child. Every situation is different. But ideally, it would be best for that child to be raised in their family, and the tribe is a different setup. Like you were saying, the family is bigger. They're all there together. Like, what a beautiful upbringing for that child.
It really is. And first of all, you should not feel embarrassed about who you were. We all have that in our background. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did or said that or thought that. I can't believe I ever voted Republican. I am just going to say that right out loud. So, but here we are.
We were Republican because our dad was Republican. So we're just like, Dad, what are we? Republican?
We assumed. Yep.
And then we became adults and did the little test, and I'm like, oh, I'm not Republican.
Yeah. Guess what? But, so we should never look back at our younger selves and think and try to apply what we know now to our younger selves, because that's never going to be a good outcome for any of us, right?
I appreciate
but and you're right that there are times when it is better for the child to be placed away from the family. But this is absolutely another example of the binary that we've set up as, again, white, Christian, cisgender, straight people, where, oh no, we should have this nuclear family and this is the way it should be done. And this is what works for us in our situation. And therefore, everybody should conform because we say so. And again, just the arrogance is just astounding. So, one of these things that I really learned to look at differently when I became an adult was standardized testing. Because here we have, we would take these standardized tests when we were in school, right? And did them on the reservation, did them everywhere. So let's just say you have a question on the standardized test that says, you need to buy a loaf of bread. You go to the store and they're out of bread. What do you do? So what would your answer be to that question? For most of us, it would be go to a different store, right?
Right.
So we're thinking too hard.
Yeah.
I know. I just feel like you were going to talk.
Yeah.
Sorry.
On the reservation, the answer is oftentimes, at least at the time that I grew up there, the answer is you turn around and go home because the next grocery store is like 25 miles away. So you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So here we have
such a different lifestyle.
Totally. Or another example of a really super awesome standardized testing question. What do you put your clothes in at home? So the correct answer in this particular example is a chest of drawers or a dresser. And the answer for a child growing up on the reservation, especially if they live in a hogan with 15 other people, is usually like maybe in a cardboard box. But those answers, just right there, two answers immediately wrong because they don't conform to our very, very different world in whiteness. And frankly, I feel like that would apply also to a lot of rural kids in, Appalachia, who may also live 20 miles from the local grocery store.
Yeah.
So
maybe they'd make their own bread. Maybe they
they would. Maybe they would.
Right.
Yeah. We don't know. But so standardized testing always bad regardless. But for anybody growing up in an environment that doesn't conform with those sorts of ideals is always going to be penalized for not conforming to those ideals.
Yeah. I think that's such a great example too. Standardized testing is such a great example of that. Like that's such a worldwide issue, I think.
Absolutely. And it's like there's a bunch of old folk tales that kind of bring this point to light just as well, but maybe like a fish being judged on how fast he climbs a tree. Of course the fish isn't going to climb the tree. So why do we expect that of them?
Right.
But and this circles right back around to what we were talking about at the very, very beginning, Ashley, when you were like, we were talking about trying to get everybody to conform to what we think everybody should conform to, and the harm and damage we cause to people, the destruction we leave in the wake of our actions.
Yeah.
Never a good thing. Never.
My husband works for the State Board of Education here in Utah.
Oh, wow.
And and they're working really hard on actually not having everything so standard, and being a little bit more active and not as test driven. And because not all kids take tests well, and not all kids, think the same way. Not all kids are good students, in your quotes. I have a couple kids that are really good students, and they're good learners. They're good at the system. They're good at learning the way that the system, and then I have a couple that are not as good at learning the way that the system is laid out. And so I'm so happy that things are trending in the right direction that way. And I think in our culture they are too. I think that that with this information age, we're starting to see the bigger picture. And we're able to kind of see outside of the little boxes that we've lived in and the cultures that have, encapsulated us. And I think there's good positive changes that are being made, which is hopeful.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really feel like, and this is again, just the whole background to standardized testing is a result of George W. Bush's No Child Left Behind. Good in theory, bad in practice. Of course, we don't want children left behind. We want children to have opportunities We want children to be prepared for the world, but standardized testing is just not the way to go about it. So, and standardized testing isn't the way to go about anything really. I mean, whether we apply it at school, whether we're applying it at church, whatever the scenario is, we're just different human beings, and being able to appreciate ourselves as a different human being than our neighbor, being able to appreciate our family as, I mean, the unique and crazy wild people that they probably are. I mean, like I said, there's 10 kids in my family. We're not all super, super close. It's just not possible. So, but appreciating everybody for the differences they bring to the table, the conversation they bring to the table is really just so important across the board.
Well, I was just going to say on the topic of schooling, there's a great Robert Redford quote, and I'll probably butcher it, but he basically says, I was a terrible student because I couldn't sit still in my chair. I wanted to be out exploring and I wanted to learn from the wind and the trees and nature. And I remember reading that probably in like 7th grade, honestly, and being like, that's it. It's not just me. Because all of us kids in my family have homeschooled at some point or another. I think because traditional schooling just did not always fit with our souls and our way of learning. And I'm still that way. If you told me I had to do a 9-to-5 job sitting at a desk, it makes my skin crawl. Like I can't do it. I need more freedom than that. And so
I feel
it's but it goes to show there's something for everyone. Like you said, there's a type of learning for everyone, whether it's within religion, within schooling. My favorite classes in church were the ones that were taught outside on the lawn. Like I vividly remember those ones. And so I'm so happy, Mary, that you mentioned the ocean and like how that heals you and is that spiritual fulfillment in you, because that really resonates. I think I can speak to Emmy as well, that truly resonates for both of us. And on that topic, you mentioned in your bio that you have a philosophy of leaving things better than you found them. I was wondering if you could explain to us how you feel, how that mentality has come into your life.
Well, I feel like we live our lives, and oftentimes we're so focused on, for example, eternity, that we forget to pay attention to what's going on right around us. We're so focused on becoming better at this or better at that, or finishing school, or being, whatever, reaching heaven, whatever it is, that we sometimes forget to take care of where we are right now. So I feel strongly that we have an obligation to actually not just do good, but be the good. Whether that is how we treat people, whether that is how we treat animals, whether that is how we treat the environment, however that looks for any individual person, how we leave things matters. We can leave a path of destruction in our wake, or we can leave healing in our wake, or we can leave happiness in our wake, whatever that looks like for each person. But if we are so focused on making sure that we get what we want in life, in eternity, that we're stepping over people and causing harm on our way to heaven, that's never a good plan. So it's important to me that I fostered dogs for a while, until I ended up in California in an apartment. But I fostered dogs for a long while, and it is truly heartbreaking to see what human beings will do to dogs. It's just heartbreaking. And honestly, having a dog in my house for sometimes a week, sometimes a year, because we can't find them a home because they've been so damaged by human beings. It's heartbreaking. Or if for somebody who fosters children, the damage that people do to their own children, whether on accident, by choice, because of addictions, whatever the case may be, the harm and damage that we do to children is just incomprehensible to me. But even if you can't foster a child, you can help a child. Even if you can't foster a dog, you can help a dog. I mean, you mentioned living in a Title I school, and I bet that you have a lot of options for, donating, for helping, for volunteering at the school, whatever that looks like in your area. I bet you have a lot of opportunities. And so those are ways that we can make a difference. Donating to a food bank, helping at a food bank, even the days of when I used to go to the church cannery and help can food, so that somebody else could have, access to nourishment, to vitamins and minerals that they need to live and grow. Just whatever we can do, but that requires a lot of letting go of what we have as far as money or things, what we're doing as far as um, bringing in money, and it's a really hard thing because here we are, and this is what we've been trained to do our whole lives. We're going to grow up, we're going to get a job, man's going to get a job, the mom's going to take care of the family. And sometimes that doesn't work out. My dad used to say, a friend of mine called this the 3Ds, and my dad would say, it's a great idea to think that you're going to grow up and get married and you're going to stay home and take care of your kids. But you can't ever forget death, divorce, and disability, because you need to be sure that you can take care of your own family, right? So that's how I grew up, and that's why education was so important to me and my family. My dad was, and my parents were very strong proponents of education, which I'm grateful for, considering how I was raised. Right, the church ideology of get married, have kids, that's your job.
Mm-hmm.
But we get so focused sometimes on making sure that we're bringing in money, making sure that we can buy the things, making sure that we oftentimes are leaving behind things that we should be focusing on, like, taking care of the environment, taking care of people who need help, taking care of others. And sometimes we really have to make a huge pivot, like, are we going to continue to buy clothes from fast fashion? Are we going to start buying clothes from thrift stores? Something tells me, Ashley, that, I've seen some stories about thrift stores from your
Love
from
a
your
good thrift
Instagram.
store. Love thrifting.
I know, it's great. And you know what? That's
Nice.
one small thing that you're doing to leave the world better, is by not participating in this fast fashion ideology. So, however it works for you, however it works for anybody, it's something we all have to think about for ourselves. But truly, seriously, letting go of the idea that the only thing we should be doing here is perfecting ourselves. Letting go of that can be hard and painful sometimes, but I am convinced for myself that everything we do to better everybody around us, to be the good, everything that we do in that pursuit is also bringing us closer to our own divinity.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
I've got chills. I'm misty. Woo! Another mic drop. That was, I can just tell that you have led such a Christ-like, kind life. We're very honored to have you here. And Emmy told me about you. I'm so happy to finally meet you, though.
Yeah, and I think we're running out of time, so I just want to ask you two short questions that we can include or not include. I'm just curious about this, though, and I know I've asked you this, and I can't remember. Are you currently LDS?
So this is actually really not hard for me to answer, but it's kind of hard for me to. I am not active in church at all. I do not believe that Heavenly Father can simultaneously say to us that family is the most important thing, but also if your family's gay, then they're not going to be part of you in heaven. Sorry. I do not believe that. 100% do not believe that that's the truth at all. I do not believe that women were meant to be shut out of participating and celebrating Jesus Christ in every single way that men do. I do not believe that. 100% do not. So are my roots in Mormonism, and they always are going to be. That's how I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to ever renew my temple recommend when it comes up this year? No, I am not. I actually had a conversation with one of my kids. Only one of my kids is, kind of still in the church. And that child I had a conversation with 2 years ago and said, you know what, I'm not comfortable I'm probably not going to renew my recommend. I might this year, but this will be the last time. And the only reason I renewed it was because I thought if that child does, decide to get married in the temple sometime soon, then I would want to be there, which honestly is really a terrible thing to think as a mother, that I can only go to my child's wedding if I pretend, if I lie to get a temple recommend. That's terrible. That's really, truly terrible. So I told that child, this is the last time. And that child is still unmarried and not dating anyone. So who knows what will happen at this point. But I had to have a conversation with that child and told them that I was going to be having this conversation with you. And I didn't want them to be taken aback if they saw it or whatever, or if I decided to share it. My other kids won't care at all. They're going to be like, okay, cool. But I didn't want that child in particular to feel hurt by this conversation, because it's something that child still has love in their heart for. But after that conversation, and that was 2 years ago, and I've been kind of disenfranchising myself since then. So that said, I am going to say that I spent 2 years in Denver, and the difference in the church experience there compared to Arizona was such a 180. Somebody gave a talk in church on Mother's Day, celebrating mothers, and literally said from the pulpit, all mothers, even those who have suffered miscarriages, have not been able to conceive, or who've had abortions, all mothers. Can you imagine those words coming out of the pulpit in Utah or Arizona? They wouldn't. And we also had a conversation in Sunday school once where a gentleman said, yeah, everybody is entitled to the priesthood, whether they're male, female, or transgender.
Ooh,
how do you think that's going to fly in Utah or Arizona? It won't. So I love that ward because it was very much open to conversation. It was actually discussion about beliefs, discussion about faith, and very much not this, you better believe this or else, which is how I grew up in Arizona and what it was like in Arizona when I left. Not every single person, obviously, we can't generalize to that degree, but if I felt that the church was ever going to look at women as something more, the way that these two men in this ward in Colorado looked at them, if I thought the church would ever do that, then I'd probably try and stay. But I don't think that they are. I don't think that they're ever going to give that up because they're so entrenched in it, number one. And number two, it works for them, like we were talking about earlier. It works for them. And like I said, I just really overall, years ago, I had to really do a deep dive and make a decision about whether or not I was active in church or active in the gospel. And during the course of that process, I did a huge deep dive into studying the scriptures, into reading talks, listening to general conference, making an honest and sincere effort to be as close to Christ as I could, and to really and truly make an informed decision of whether by faith or knowledge about how I was going to move forward. In that process, the more I studied the Book of Mormon, the less I believed in the church. There's so much in the Book of Mormon, especially, okay, here we are, Jesus Christ comes and appears to the Nephites in the Book of Mormon. There's 400 years of peace, right? Why? Because if you read the Book of Mormon, they're doing what Jesus Christ told them to, which is taking care of the poor and needy, taking care of each other. There was more an equalization. And after 400 years, what did they start to do? They started to be like, oh, I'm not going to do this for them. This is my stuff. And I'm very much simplifying the story, as I'm sure you know. It's definitely not that simplified or cut and dry, but that's kind of the gist of it. And literally and truly, the more I read about the Bible, the more I read the Book of Mormon, the less I believed in the church. And for me, that was kind of like, okay, that's when I took a step back. Like, I really need to be able to make my own peace with this one way or the other. And at that point, I left Arizona, went to Colorado, had some really great experiences with the church there, and also just continued to not believe in the church, not believe that, and not necessarily, I'm not saying that I don't believe in, I don't know how I feel about Jesus Christ or God as a divine being, but I read this article that talked about how God can't possibly be a man because God is not the one who creates life. That is always a woman. It is a woman who creates life, who grows life. It's because of a woman. And that always struck me how powerful it is, how powerful we are as women, and yet how we have been sidelined constantly by church, by society, by everything. And
Yeah.
I just don't think it's right.
Mm.
It's such an interesting take. I think that my good friend Tara was on a podcast and talked about that as a woman, we as women we are creators, and
Yeah.
it is like it does make you. It's one of those things where if you just like sit back and think about it, what makes more sense?
Yeah.
I had a conversation with my children recently, and I've shared this on the podcast before, but it's good, a little refresher. But I asked them, do you guys, like, if there's a heavenly father, do you think there's a heavenly mother? And they said, yeah, absolutely. And their eyes lit up just at the possibility of it. But that's the thing, to children, those ideas are so simple. And
Very.
as adults, we don't see the simple ideas. And so we're just so grateful for you sharing your story with us. And
Absolutely.
it's, we honor your story, and I'm glad that I'm sure for you it was good to give it your all and then be able to walk away. You can say you did everything you could, and now you know what you believe. And I think that is, I hope that for everyone to find their own spiritual path. That's what I truly hope for everyone.
Yeah. And I second that completely. I recognize it's going to look different for people. For other people, I know they really find true joy in the church, and great, more power to you. But for me, it just wasn't going to work anymore. And it turns out I have 2 children who are members of the queer community, and I'm so glad that I started making those conscious efforts and steps, and was like, you know what? It's okay for people who are gay. They don't choose to be gay, which is the way I was raised. That's the era that I was raised in. That's how I was brought up in the church. And I'm so, so grateful that I came to that before my kids came out and told me that they were gay. Because I've often wondered, would they have felt like they could tell me? Would they have felt that this was something they could say to me? Would I have been willing to hear them? Would I have towed the line with the church? And, I mean, I'm from that era where Dallin H. Oaks was like, it's better for your children to die in a fiery pit of hell than to be gay. Or whatever he said. I'm totally paraphrasing, but it's the same intent. Sorry. So grateful that I was able to get to that point before, because I would never, ever, ever want my children to feel as though I was not going to be there for them for any reason whatsoever.
Mm.
I'm so glad
we want to respect your time. And so I want to ask this last question really quickly. I would love to know if you could share with us 1 or 2 things about that you learned from the reservation.
To respect nature and creation. That's the number one thing. To respect the land, to respect the water, to respect what the earth gives you, to respect the animals who are in your care. The sheep herders taking care of their animals. The families growing crops. To just be respectful of that. That's one of the number one things that I would say is an actual, truly a takeaway from my time on the reservation. And then the second thing is just genuinely that we are truly, truly all brothers and sisters, whether you believe in a divine being or not, whether you believe in God, whether you believe in Mother Nature as an entity, however you look at it, we truly are one family. And honestly, we don't all get along with every single members of our family all the time. We just don't. But truly, we are family, and there's just no reason whatsoever for us to ever think that we are better than other members of our family, and therefore to treat them differently for whatever reason. They're not. We're supposed to be family. However you look at that, we're supposed to be treating each other as though they are just as valued and important as I am. Whether they're homeless, whether they're, an addict of whatever kind, whatever anybody's case may be, you are truly no better than them. We're just not. We're not. So I've carried that through my life, especially because, when we were in Missouri and things were so pretty dire. Frankly, it's a shock that we weren't homeless. We have to see the value in each other as human beings and not see who they are on the outside for whatever that looks like, whether it's who they are as a man, a woman, a transgender person, whatever anybody looks like or is on the outside has no bearing whatsoever on who they are or can be on the inside. And that would be the number one thing that I would say was there as a child and that I still try to carry through as an adult, is just simply to treat each other as though they were you.
Wow. What a great note to end on. This has been so insightful. I have felt the Spirit so many times. Thank you so much for being here.
And I did want to comment on that last thing. I just wanted to make sure we had time for that last question, but I think that's so cool too that you did already come to that conclusion when your kids came to you. Our brother is gay, and when he came out to our family, it took us a couple years, actually. I think some of us, we all embraced him, and we're very loving, accepting family, luckily. And so we all embraced him and loved him. We also didn't really know how to walk the line with the church, And so it was tricky for me for a couple years. I wasn't sure how I felt, and he wasn't sure how he felt about if people were born gay or if it was a sin or if, like it took some time because it happened at a time that it was so new, it was so newly kind of being accepted. And so it was a tricky, anyway, so I applaud you for getting to that point before your kids came to you, because I think you're a huge step ahead of most families. So
bravo. And thank you for that. I really appreciate it. We have this idea that our bodies are who we are instead of our spirits being who we are. And as members of this church, shouldn't that be the opposite? Our spirits are who we are. That's who defines us. Sometimes our spirit, our soul, is not what aligns with, what we envision it should align with, what body it should align with. That's none of our business. And it has nothing to do with anything other than that's who that person is. Just respect that,
Absolutely.
I love it. Thank you so much. You're amazing. You're amazing. We didn't really know you. Ashley told me what to expect, and I'm like, I don't know, actually. I don't really know her.
She told me a few details, and I was very excited.
I know.
We were both like, you're going to learn so much.
Yeah, the details we knew, we were so excited, but we also didn't really know, So it was amazing. You did a great job.
I really appreciate you having me on, and I apologize for taking up so much of your time. I'm an hour behind you, so I'm not necessarily the one crunched for time here, and I don't have small children anymore. But so I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me tonight. And I feel like there's a gazillion other rabbit holes I could have gone down and kept having to be like, no, that's not relevant. No, we can't. No. Anyway,
honestly,
I know.
I fascinating.
We could have talked forever.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to That's Church. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at That's Church Podcast. We appreciate your support more than you know. Seriously, thank you so much. You can now unlock our locked episodes for just $2.99 a month. by clicking on the lock and following the prompts. That is right on Apple Podcast or on Spotify. Every penny goes toward the production of our podcast. We have an interview next week with Aubrey Chavez where we discuss her faith journey and her deconstruction and reconstruction process, her role and how it all started as a host for Faith Matters alongside her husband Tim, and the importance of learning about other religions, of course. We also talk about the upcoming Restore Conference and what to expect. It is going to be incredible, like truly. Keep listening to each other and keep loving. Thanks again for your support and